Hello, welcome to another episode with me, Onyx. And today I'm gonna go back to the old introduction of, you know, I used to call my channel Full Circle. And today I'm going back to that because today I see the snake eating its tail. And I see or I feel uh, the world of matter and the world of spirit coming together, making a point. And that point, today I see man straddling between these two worlds of possibility and what is, merging together. And the wizard, the sorcerer, the magician is weaving new possibilities and realities. Like there's this creative point. The past and the future, the above and the below, are coming together at this point, in the present moment, in this very moment. And this portal opens, and consciousness comes through. Awareness, life, and creativity. It's like this bridge, it's the center. And we access that in many ways and create, solve problems, do things, shape the world, shape our lives through action and willpower. Um, so Full Circle is very fitting as the representation of the mystic arts, the science, the hermetics, the occult. And as I dive more into myself, trying to understand and figure out my chart, my birth chart, um, I stumbled across a video by one of my favorite astrologers who does Vedic astrology. And in my mind, because I'm trained in Western astrology, um, I just convert everything he says into Western astrology, which isn't too hard. But one of the huge arguments is, do the outer planets have an influence and a power? Do we recognize them as planets? And so I really like the astrologer that I listen to. I think it's called like KSC Astrology. Um, he really brings Vedic astrology down into the way I actually understand and have been taught astrology. So, in a really weird way, he's teaching Vedic astrology in a Western style. Um, but he was interviewing a famous Vedic astrologer who's Western in origin. And they were, for the first 12 minutes, the guy was trying to say, in Vedic astrology, we don't validate Pluto, Neptune, or Uranus as planets really making an action. So, example, let's say Mars is transiting your moon and it conjuncts on a certain day, and like the influence of Mars as a character, as a power, um, will cause. Mars represents the knife. It also represents anger and warlike behaviors. It's literally a soldier or a warrior. And the moon is very motherly. It also represents the body. So this could be a day. And so events come in, usually 3 degrees before, and then right on that hot point of exact degree, the full conjunction, and 3 days after. So you could get in a car wreck 3 days before, get the injury, go in for surgery right on that point, and then post surgery follow up, and then you're out in the clear. So within that like 6 degrees, an event happens from like beginning right on it to the end. And so, and it all depends upon the speeds and stuff. So in the argument, they're saying Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto are not like planets. But they were trying to say they're more like transistors. They're more like energies, forces that are going to be applied. And so they don't have a direct influence. And so the astrologer was trying to say they're more like forces, like gravity is a force. And so it's like kind of being applied to all of us in a very broad, general sense. And so the way around it is they always go back to the argument of the north and south node of the moon being bigger influences, and whatever you're seeing with these three outer planets can actually be seen with the north and south node of the moon, and they're switching poles and changing signs throughout your life. Though, so they're, and I really say no, because the reality is the north and south node of the moon aren't objects in the sky. Period. So let's look at the very basic facts. North and south node of the moon are not objects, but they're points where the ecliptic and I'm going to call it the celestial orbit meet. So they're points where two circles are meeting. Here we have our ecliptic, we have the moon, and so they create. Just go look it up. A visual of north and south node of the moon, and the ecliptic itself isn't real. So it is and isn't, and so same with like your ascent. It's a point, but it's a placement. It's an area of delineated space. The reality of it is it doesn't exist like a planet or an asteroid. It's not in alignment with a constellation. So I feel like all the information they use to argue against the planets is actually the perfect argument flipped on its head to validate the planets. So the other thing is they're saying astrology and the planets that affect you can be seen with the naked eye. And so anything that can't be seen with the naked eye doesn't directly influence you. And the north and south node of the moon cannot be seen with the naked eye because they're not objects. The sun and the moon aren't planets, they're considered luminaries. So if we really just go back to the basics and honor the technicalities, then we have to honor the fact that the sun is actually a star and is not a planet, and maybe shouldn't be given planet-like qualities. The moon may be hollow, and it may be artificial. We don't know. So astrology is an art form, but it's also mathematical. So in one way, so it can be considered, and math is an art, and so there's an art to it, and I guess you have to decide for yourself. if those planets, those exalted planets, those generation, what was that word? You know, I don't want to call it terrestrial. I would just call them extraterrestrial planets, are real and exerting a force in your life. I kind of call them the alien planets. And so here's something you also have to know. In order for you to gain full access to these outer planets, you have to pass Saturn. Saturn, like in full circle, and the Ouroboros eating its tail, straddles the inner and outer worlds. And so in Kabbalah, Saturn has a dark side, and its shadow casts down upon Earth. And we at Earth are looking up at Saturn, and we see the dark goddess, veiled in mystery. The other half of the goddess is facing those three outer planets, the terrestrial and the celestial realms beyond Earth, and its life lessons, and it shines brightly as a white goddess. And so the mystery of the dark Isis and the light Isis is supposed to kind of be reflected in Bina and Saturn, the ruler of time. And it's considered the guardian of the threshold. And just so myths can point the way, but myths have to also then just be considered myths. So we get abstract understanding of Saturn. And in their argument, they used the myth, the famous myth of churning the lake to get the elixir of immortality. And he was using Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva as the three outer planets and their influence. Western astrology has the same thing. Pluto / Hades and Zeus and Poseidon are a triple head god. So Hades is actually Zeus ruling the underworld, and Poseidon is Zeus ruling the sea, and Zeus is the sky god. In their transcendent forms, you could say that's Uranus is the sky god, and Hades, and Zeus, yeah. So Hades is Pluto, and Poseidon is Neptune. So we get another triple-faced god. And in the Hindu mythology, Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva are the triple-faced. So how does that then translate? Why would you then say in that argument that they don't exist as planets because they're a triple godhead? The reality is they do. Poseidon is Poseidon. Zeus is Zeus, and Hades is Hades. So just because you're a triple godhead doesn't mean that they don't function independently as individuals and as planets, yet all as one. So we're pointing to a collective. And isn't it interesting that we assign a collective generational influence to these planets because they move so slow through a sign? So some astrologers say due to the speed of the planet, the impact can be more forceful. So like the moon moves pretty fast through a sign, 2.5 days. And so the opposite can be also argued. A slow moving planet stays on a degree for a very long time. And so its influence, instead of being diffused, could be concentrated. And the impact could be significant. So the argument, so some astrologers say, you know, there's a lot of controversy. That's what's really kind of cool about astrology is you can argue all you want. You can have debates, so it's a living subject. It's still working itself out. And it's interesting that you can only make sense of it, I think, depending upon how open you are, by how many perspectives you're willing to entertain. And I think we lose a lot. We lessen our astrology when we're only entertaining it within the confines of what we are willing to believe, what we are willing to understand, instead of viewing it from multiple perspectives. And maybe our belief and opinion doesn't matter so much. So it's been my experience that to get the full awareness of a planet, a conjunction or opposition is in order, and a sign influence. So if you have a rising sign of Pisces, that's obviously going to make Neptune more active, like more clear, showing up as a personal planet for you. And it can become a chart ruler. To decide if it's going to be Jupiter or not will depend. If your sun is in the 9th house, then Jupiter becomes more active. And then you have to look at the whole chart as an equation or an argument. And in that case, by looking at those two facts, Jupiter might take a stronger influence than Neptune. And so Jupiter could become the chart ruler. So that's important. So let's say once again it's a Pisces rising and the sun is in the 12th house. Neptune could easily become the chart ruler. And the reality is consultations should be so there needs to be a lot of field work. Every time you do consultations, you're backing up the data that you've learned, and you're examining the data that's taught, that's been printed by other astrologers, and you're also questioning the person. This is the field work, and seeing how it actually is true for them or not true for them in their life. And so it's not exactly a mystical science, but there's a lot of variables. A lot of people think Neptune is the planet of illusions, and this is where you lie. And I'm like, how about not? Once again, let's really look at the fullness of their chart and decide. A place that's clouded, illusionary, misty, idealistic, isn't exactly a lie. This might be a place where they find their clarity. So example, I have Neptune actually in Sagittarius, and I have a Pisces moon with Venus in Pisces. So Neptune becomes a stronger force in my life. So instead of me having a religious bent or a belief-based reality, I studied world philosophies like Taoism, Hinduism, Shinto, martial arts, and I found clarity, I found strength, I found a lot of stability and insight through studying that. It had nothing to do with being a liar had nothing to do with like faith-based beliefs. And so you have to look at the whole chart to decide. And where is my Jupiter? It's on the cusp of Aries and Taurus. And so sometimes, here we go again, with planets on the cusp, a rising sign on the cusp, kind of basic textbook is you incorporate both those energies. But couldn't the cusp also be like when the moon is on the cusp and it goes void of course? I feel like my Jupiter energy went right through the shithole. It got flushed. And where did it go? It disappeared. And so I actually consider my Jupiter void of course, and I apply the role of the moon to my Jupiter because it's really not influencing me with the Jupiterian luck, abundance, open-mindedness, and all that Jupiter stuff. In a weird way, I'm absent of the Jupiter energy. And so, could you imagine someone's chart where Jupiter isn't influencing them? Maybe its opposite planet, Saturn, then its influence is stronger. And the reality is that's very true for me. I love the Saturn colors. And I've always felt like an old man. I was like, and I pick up some of the fears of Capricorn, Saturn type people. I'm always thinking about death. I've never not thought about death. And it's part of my rational system. Why am I doing this when I could die tomorrow? Why am I buying this? Why am I getting excited now? What is the point of life? So it definitely brings in an existential experience. My rising sign is probably Aquarius. And with Jupiter absent, what type of Aquarius am I but more Saturnian, like my father? And my father was definitely the type of Aquarius with the devouring his children type Capricorn Saturn energy. So my father definitely had more of the Saturn type energy. He was more silent, more brooding, more slow moving, and forceful. He wasn't prone to eccentricities. He had a few. Like, what I thought was really eccentric is he actually wore an apron in the kitchen. Another eccentricity is he did experiment with different toppings on pizza. But that's about the extent of his eccentric side. He was very classical with studying astronomy, being a university teacher, teaching foreigners, having a huge network of foreign people. And so, me being influenced by foreigners and being introduced to the world like that. My dad also loves flying. He loves model airplanes. And so that's very Aquarius too. Then he even adopted 2 Aquarians. So there's a lot of Aquarius energy in my house. But now we can see why Uranus is in Scorpio for me and trining my Neptune in Cancer. But we can also see why Neptune is in Sagittarius, because my dad did bring the world to me. And I was aware of things. I was aware of my grandfather, my adoptive grandfather, is also an Aquarius. And he did a lot of missionary work in other countries. He went to Africa, he went to Korea, and he would always bring back souvenirs. And so my view of the world my and culture and people doing things differently was always there. It was just the norm. And so it makes sense that my Neptune would be in Sagittarius with that kind of adventurous spirit. I wanted to learn. I wanted to learn about China. I wanted to learn about Japan. I wanted to learn more about Africa. I wanted to learn, and not them as like people, but them as a culture. And I want to know their spiritual stuff, like magic and shamanism. And I love, and so in a weird way, when I learn, I like to do it in a very Sagittarian way. I want to eat their food, read their books, speak their language, be one of them, and mingle that way. I want to go there and get my education there instead of in the classroom. And if I can't, I read about it. Um, so, so when you look at your personal story, it can reveal insights into your chart. Bottom line, really. So, let's go back to those alien planets a little bit more. We kind of got on a detour. I've noticed that when one of these extraterrestrial planets is influencing in a very strong way your sun or your moon, you get to experience them to the fullness of what they represent. So my best friend, she has the Aquarian planet Uranus conjunct her conjunct her sun in Scorpio. And as I observe her, I see she's an Aquarius and very much a Scorpio. And I can see that in the way she dresses. I can see that in the type of friends she has. I see that in her humanitarian efforts. And she has a Virgo moon. Oh my God. And I see that too. And it's hilarious, actually, to watch someone who is really both fully a Scorpio and fully an Aquarius. And she's like a magical alien for sure. And so this is a really good example of someone who could embody those energies and it's an influence for sure. Like, she's an amazing spiritual channel. Like, I've never met someone like her. Which is, so it's interesting. So someone who has the sun or moon conjunct Neptune, or their rising sign, one of those 4 bars, MC, AC, DC, conjunct, they're going to have a strong influence, or an opposition. So a conjunction and opposition are the 2 strongest aspects. The other thing that could be really strong would be one of those planets conjunct the north or south node. And so we could really say these planets are so influential that unless it's focused, you may not get the full understanding, the full experience of that planet. Everyone who has a strong influence is usually a world changer. They play a bigger part in the world, in their generation, if they have a strong influence that way. I think they're totally planets, and they totally have their own strengths. And maybe the assignment isn't as narrow, because like Uranus is a rule breaker. Why would it stick to its own sign? And Neptune dissolves boundaries. Why would it stick to its own sign? Oh, they're transcendent. And Pluto is so deep and piercing why would it stick to its own sign? And it's full of mystery. And it's a total rebel. It's a rebel. So why would any of these three planets be stuck? So they're transcendent. So to understand them, you cannot understand them in their fullness unless you have transcended. So some type of ascension process will happen with these planets. You may be ascended, here to ascend others. You might ascend it in a Scorpion way by looking at all the bullshit. You might be doing it in the Aquarius way through seeing a bigger picture and broadening your mind. You might do it through a Neptunian way, dialing into spirituality and channeling it, like broadening your scope through being inclusive, like a inclusivity that goes beyond the five senses. So it'd be like a mystic level of inclusiveness where you're, so I'll have to leave it at that. So yeah, they're the transcendent planets. It's kind of hard to understand a transcendent being unless you're transcendent, or to understand the influence of a transcendent planet. If you're, so I would say all these transcendent planets are, it's like a Buddha, you know, a god, a deity, and maybe they are more godlike and powerful than the inner planets, everything from Saturn inward towards the Earth. So we say the inner planets rule the daily functions, and the outer planets are more broad. But I hope that opens up your mind to using them. And since they're actual objects in space and not just points, they're not just geometrical points measured like the north and south node and the ascent, maybe they do carry more weight. And why stick with the rule seen with the naked eye? I mean, sometimes answers are just to pacify people in the time, you know. Ask a dumb question, get a dumb answer. Ask a great question, get a great answer. Can you handle the answer? Can you handle the truth? That, you know, as above, so below, as within, so without. And can you not take it personal when you don't have a transcendent mission here on the